Hey guys, it is Wednesday morning and we are live again with another episode of ASMM Digital's Small Business Connections. We are on episode 49 today. I cannot believe we're almost at 50. This has been an amazing journey. We're really excited about it. I want to remind you that we're live today on Facebook. We're live on LinkedIn and we're live on YouTube. But if you're watching it anywhere other than YouTube right now, please go over and help us out. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers over there, and we could really use your help. So please do consider going over there and helping us out. I also want to remind you that if you are struggling with your digital marketing and you're not ready to hire an agency, that's okay. We have created a campus. It's asmmcampus.com. You can go there and get free information. You can go there and get some paid information, but there's a lot of information there that will help you through, and we're adding to that on a daily basis. All right, I want to introduce you, and I'm going to talk to you. I want to introduce you to Tony. Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Martignetti, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. And where are you? Where are you located?
I'm just outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
Nice. Is the weather wonderful up there this time of year?
Beautiful, beautiful. Can't complain.
Yeah. And you are a coach. You're with Inspired Purpose Coaching. Is that correct?
I am.
Awesome. Yes. How long have you done that?
About 2.5 years now.
Okay. What did you do before?
I was a biotech executive. I worked in the finance and strategy part of the business for about 25 years.
That's cool. So you've actually left a sciencey business numbers game for more of the human emotions game.
Yeah, I think there's always a human's emotions game in biotech as well, but I definitely wanted to have more of a connection to the people side of the business.
Good. Yeah. And I think that's important. So many people think of business as, I remember being in real estate years ago and people would say it's not personal, it's business. And I would say it's always personal. There's always a personal element to it. So, so we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I wanted to talk about navigating change first, because aren't we all in the middle of that? Every other day, things are changing. So, yeah. So tell me what you've got. What are you helping people with as far as navigating change right now?
Yeah, and there's a myriad of different things people are dealing with right now. I mean, whether it be people are, considering a change because their jobs have shifted or they've lost their jobs, and they're thinking about what could I do next, or they're just seeing this as a big pause and a reset, and they want to say, what can I do after there's a quote unquote new normal? What can I do differently? So change has so many different forms, and I help them to think about what's possible and what they can do to be in the best place for that next, whatever that next is for them.
For some of us, it's hard. Change for me is hard. I am the funny thing is I am the fly by the seat of your pants kind of girl that says, oh, well, let's, I know when we used to live in England and my husband would come home and he's like, where are you guys? He'd come home from work and then we would be like, oh, we took a train down and we're in Dover today. We're in a totally different, and he's like, what in the world? But at the same time, I'm finding myself struggling with the way our business is having to change. So one day we're out there talking about curbside pickup, and the next day we're saying, oh, by the way, you can come in. And the next day we're like, oh, well, a lot of people can come in, or, we're going back to curbside pickup. So it's a constant change for me. And that's a hard part of my business right now. So do you have advice for people on how, when they're really struggling with that, everything feels off kilter? How should they handle that?
Yeah, the first thing is to really understand, what is the change doing for you, and how can you be at the forefront of change? One of my favorite quotes about change is that don't just embrace change, create it, because it's inevitable. So there's an element of realizing that it's there. What is it doing it for you, so you can be understanding, is this a good thing, bad thing, and what can I control about it? Some things are just out of your control.
Yeah.
And you have to realize what can you control, and what are the steps you can take to move forward. So
yeah, I have a 24-year-old, but when he was about 14 years old, a coach told him to control the controllables.
Yeah.
And it was such a smart thing to say. And he lives by this. So it is, I used to do Ironman. He used to do soccer. And a lot of, that is you're going into a race and you're going, okay, well, I've done all my training, but what if the weather is horrible that day? Okay, well, the weather's horrible. If it is, it is. How are you going to control that? So you're going to have your raincoat, or you're going to have a hat, or whatever it is. So I think that's part of, I like what you just said. I think you do have to think, okay, so there are some things out of my control, but what actually is in my control?
Yeah.
So it reminds me a little bit of that quote from Apollo 13, where he says, what is going right on the ship right now?
Yeah. Let's start with
It's
that.
like, exactly, what's going right? So, all right. Well, I want to talk about something that I think is on everybody's mind. And it was the reason I was the most excited about having you on, is avoiding burnout, because people are facing that right now.
Yeah.
Most people have been working nonstop since the beginning of this. So what are some of your tips for avoiding burnout?
Yeah. Burnout comes from different sources. There's lots of different flavors of burnout. And so really understanding where it's coming from is important. Is the burnout because you are burnout from doing the same things over and over again and you don't feel the passion for what you're doing? Or is it because you're just simply working too much? There's all different types of burnout. The one that most commonly is happening right now is there's an element of being in the same place and being on Zoom so much that you're constantly feeling though you can't get away from that pattern. So you do have to consciously take control of how you're structuring your day. Um, the concept of being the author versus the reporter of your life comes to mind when I think of burnout. And that is when you start your day, really make sure that you're planning your day so that you're in control and not just being on autopilot. Um, that includes creating some time and some space for you to step away from the computer, because that digital aspect of just being on the computer all day will wear you out. Be in nature.
Absolutely. And I think, I've started doing something that I think is fun and it's helpful. I've started looking at my calendar ahead of time and talking to the people who are on it, who I think, I'm not going to have to take a lot of notes in this. So during this phone call, I'd like to call instead of doing it by video. And I'm going to go for a walk while we're doing it. I'm going to
Yeah.
walk and talk. You'll be in my ears. We'll be walking. I'll talk to you, and we'll be able to have a conversation without having that constant in front of the screen filling.
Yeah. And even for meetings, like where you have to have meetings that go on for a period of time, there's also ways to break it up. So you have this ability to, go into breakout sessions, have some interaction, so people don't feel like they're being just you know uh, a watcher. They're actually
Right.
actively participating and doing something that is breaking it up. So there's always ways to create some element of not just zooming out.
Right. I like the idea that the way you just said that. I like the idea that sometimes you can choose. You can make a choice in how you handle this, right? And for me, the idea of I've got to sit down and be in front of the screen it's just very hard. It's very,
Yeah.
very hard. So I have a question though. We're talking about burnout, and somebody told me, and it may have been Michael Hyatt, may have been a Michael Hyatt podcast, where he talked about having. I love Michael Hyatt.
Me too.
He just has great ideas. But I think he talked about the example you're setting for your employees, right? If you're burning yourself out, what example are you setting for your employees? Because they're going to follow down that same path.
Absolutely. I love that you say that because that is truly one of the big tenets of what I teach in terms of how to be a great leader. It's being that example, and also making sure you're taking care of yourself first. It seems self-centered, but in reality, if you can't be, in charge of and leading yourself, you can't lead others.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that includes self-care. It includes how you're being. If you're not being the person you want to be in terms of in the world, then you can't be the person who other people will look up to.
Right.
Who will follow.
Well, And I read that it's stewardship, really. So sometimes you feel selfish asking someone else to help you. You feel selfish about passing a duty on to somebody else, whether it's your email. My emails are crazy and I've had to pass them on to somebody else. Or it's, I don't want to take this meeting. I just won too many meetings. I want to put somebody else in it. And it feels selfish a lot of the times. But the truth is, if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to lead the company in the way you would want to do it.
Absolutely. And it's funny bringing up the delegation aspect of this, which is really interesting. There's a right way to delegate and there's a wrong way to delegate. And it comes down to ensuring that you pass on delegation in a way that informs people about the importance of the task. And it's not just about, just do this and, get it done. It's about telling them why this is important and what it frees up for you and what it does for them in the long run. So there's an element of shepherding it in for them. So.
That's great. Well, and that goes, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about transparency, and transparency in your marketing was what we were talking about. But then we said, what about your internal marketing? And what you just said is exactly that. It's your internal marketing. You're saying, hey, I need you to cover this particular thing, and here is why, and this is how it's going to build our business.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it's very important. So on that note, how do you build high-performing teams? How do you go about building a team that can not just assist you with checking your email, but help you build your business? How do you do that?
Well, it comes down to, for me, there's two things that really come to mind. And one of them is so foundational that it's, you can't do anything without it. And that's trust. Trust is so important. And if you don't have that, it's really hard to build a foundation beyond that. If you don't have people, trusting you and trusting each other, it's hard for anything to get done that's meaningful. The second part of this is connection. And communication goes hand in hand with connection. You have to be connected. And that doesn't mean you have to be 24/7 with people. It means when you connect with people, you're with them and you're not like half with them. Your phone in one hand and your eyes on them. You have to be with them and kind of showing them that you care. Connection is so important. And when you have those two pieces together, the rest of the stuff comes along with that. There's an element of creating the right types of friction because you want people to be diverse in their ideas. You don't want a bunch of people who come into a room and just say, oh yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Let's go. I'll go to lunch. And we agree on lunch too. You want people to have some friction around the ideas so that better ideas come together. And then you also want psychological safety, which I know is an overused term these days, but it's really about ensuring people feel safe to speak up and share, and without the fear of being shot down or the fear of failure. Those things are very important, especially in high stakes games where lives are on the line. So those are the elements that are really important to have a high performing team.
Right. Well, and I love these talks. I love just chatting with people and figuring out what it is, because sometimes it gives me this idea that I think about and I think, oh my God, have I done this? Right. And for me, I am a mom. I am a mom first and foremost. I've got 3 kids and it's yes, I run a business, but interestingly, I run a business with 3 other moms. And my son, who is actually the mom of his group. So we jokingly say we are all moms in our group. But as a mom, you're very likely to say, this is how I want things done, that because I said so. And so I have to catch myself in my business that I don't do that to the people I work with. And they have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Because they're all moms. So they're likely to boss me around too. So,
no,
all right.
It's a good catch. I love that you point that out.
Yeah, I love that you talked about that, because I had not considered the fact that as a mom, I might say because I said so, right? And I don't think I do, but I'm going to definitely be paying attention to that now. So I really appreciate that. So let's talk about, we live these lives. We are in, especially right now, I feel like I'm at my desk 24/7. So how do we live a fulfilling life that's not just in front of our desk? So what are
Yeah,
some of the tips you have for that?
absolutely. And maybe I'll start by just giving you a quick story that will help to bring this to life. Um, Oftentimes I talk to people about how they've taken this path that has brought them, to where they are. They've climbed a mountain and they get to the top of this mountain and they realize they've climbed the wrong mountain, or they feel like, wow, is this really all there is? I don't feel like I've done the right thing. And that is what led me to this, to the thought process of how can I help people to ensure that they're climbing the right mountain, that they're, in the right place. And one of the things that I realized is that you're climbing the right mountain when the struggle that you have, because there will be struggles, it feels like growth and not like you can't wait till it's over.
Right.
There's an element of that comes up for people as they're climbing up their corporate ladder or whatever it may be that they're journeying on. And so to come back to what fulfillment means to me and to see what it means to be a fulfilling life, it's all about knowing that you are growing, and that fulfillment comes from not just growing at work, but knowing that you've set some type of a parameter around what do I want for myself? What does the success of my life look like? And what is the legacy that I'm setting out for me? And some people might say, well, what about my company, or what about the things that I need to do at work? Yeah, that's all important, but you have to have like a goal for your life. Like, what do you want
Right.
to look back and say, I want my life to mean this? And set things for your life overall, and then do things towards that. That might mean traveling to places that you've always wanted to go and setting those small steps towards making that happen, or having a hobby that's outside of work and spending time with people and friends who oftentimes you put to the side when you're in search of that one goal, which becomes your job or your company.
Right.
um, so it's really about creating a container for things outside of work.
Right. Well, I have to say, yeah, once in a while on Twitter, I spend a lot. You've probably seen that. I spend a lot of time on Twitter.
Yeah.
Once in a while on Twitter, people will say, you'll see somebody say, "So, if you died tomorrow, what would they say about you at your funeral?"
Yeah.
Right? And is it something you'd want them to say? And I got so lucky in that 3 years ago, I started a charity for suicide prevention. And
Yeah.
I have to tell you, when you do something that is so, you find it's like finding your purpose, right? You find that
Mhm.
moment that you're like, this is what I was meant to do. Your whole life changes. Everything becomes so much easier if you're like, this is absolutely what I was meant to do. So for me, like, if that's how they remember me, is that I was somebody who saved one person's life, then I'm happy. Then I've done my job here.
And that's fantastic. I mean, really, that you're really tapping into the reason why this is so important. I call it living our legacy. And I say our legacy because it's about our collective legacy. You don't have, it's not about one person working alone. It's about tapping into what you can do together. You don't have to necessarily create something that is a solo mission. But if you find people who are doing something that you really love, tap into that and do it. That's cool. This is not about everyone starting their own companies. It's about finding the joy and fulfillment in the things that are out there. And if you feel like you're not feeling fulfilled, then there's always a way to find that fulfillment. You just
Right.
have to find a way to resonate with that.
Right. Well, and you see that in the world of running. You see it in the world of Ironman. People who find something that is just, this gives them joy, and if that's what it is, and maybe your legacy is, man, that was one of the most competitive people I've ever met. How fun was that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's your legacy, but whatever it is, as long as you feel it and you find that feeling within yourself that is, this is what I'm meant to do. This is really good for me, right? And
Yeah.
good for the people around me as well. I think they almost always go hand in hand.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you're filled with joy, it actually helps and ripples around everyone around you. And that's truly the case. And, I won't go on for hours here, but the reality is when you're feeling empty and there's holes in you, then it has the opposite effect. It brings people to a different place. You're not bringing your full self to life and to the people around you. And we don't want that. We need everyone completely awake and completely fulfilled, because that's what the world needs. More people who are bringing themselves. So,
What's really amazing, Tony, about what you do and about what the world is now? There are so many more people who do what you do, and there's so much more self-awareness today than there was yesterday. But the coolest part, as I see your job, is not just in helping the people who you're helping, but the trickle-down effect of it, right?
yeah.
If you think about, you're helping people, and yes, they're helping the people around them, but more importantly, they're often going to be passing these things on to their children.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, and I'll just go on a little tangent here to say, that's the challenge of being in my role. When my son's always, like, stop coaching me, But the reality is that it's powerful when you start to see that what you're bringing to people is a tool that they can then pass on to other people. And that's amazing. I love that feeling, to be able to have this gift and be able to share it with people. It's awesome.
Right. Exactly. And now I'm going to go off on a tangent to say the same thing. One of the things so our charity, one of the things we do is we give money to schools, and we thought we would give it to schools and they would help high schoolers to get through depression and anxiety and all that. But interestingly, the schools who reached out for grants were elementary schools. And so we have helped several elementary schools with different things like sensory paths or calming boxes or things along those lines. And what I love about doing that is that we're teaching these children in kindergarten and first grade that this is what a feeling is, and this is okay. This is how you express that. And it's okay to be angry or to be sad or to be upset or to be jealous. It's okay. Those things are okay. So I think we're living in a world that is a much better place for our children now than it was even 10 years ago.
I love that. I love that. We need it. The earlier we can get to people and really help them to see that there's more to learn and to know and to teach them. That's powerful.
Right. So, all right. This is my favorite subject of all time, improving human connections, because I think it's the key to life. What is your advice there?
Yeah. And I'll just say it starts with ourselves. Human connection, starting from within, because one of the things that I discovered is that in my tagline is inspiration through honest conversation. When we have conversations with ourselves to truly understand who we are on the inside, it starts to open up things. We truly understand what is important to ourselves. And then when we do that, when we do the inner work, we start to see that we can connect better with the people around us, because they get to see who we are. And that improvement of human connections is so important these days, because we want to know what makes people tick. We want to know how we can have better relationships so that we can, create better things together. And so for me nowadays, there's a lot of people out there who are lonely, depressed, feeling, literally in the same office and feeling very lonely because they're not being heard. And so what I want to find is a way to improve that by having each person come alive and speak up and share and then connect with each other. So that's really what I'm all about, because I'm a stand for, making sure people don't burn out, that people don't feel, unfulfilled. And the way to do that is to make sure people feel connected.
Absolutely. Well, and you can be in a room full of people and still be the loneliest person.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that comes down to realizing that you're worth connecting, right? You're worth more than you believe you are. So you know.
Yeah. There's an element of that that's it's appreciating people's differences and then connecting to curiosity and saying, well, tell me why, why you think that way, and why it is that what made you who you are, and let's talk about that. There's this concept of bringing diversity into the workplace, but not diversity in people, but more diversity of thinking. And I said earlier about how great teams are built on they have friction, and friction comes from the fact that there's people thinking different things. If you don't have that, you don't have a great team.
Right.
So that's the starting point. It's having that cognitive diversity.
So I'm going to tell you how we do that, and then you tell me if you have a better plan. In our
Yeah.
office, one of the things we do is we take the Enneagram test. Everybody who starts, we take the Enneagram test. We also
Yeah.
take, by the way, we take the 5 love languages test. Somebody taught me that and said,
That's a good one.
put that in your business as well, and it's very helpful for us. I don't hire people who are in the same Enneagram sphere as I'm in, because they're too much like me. I need somebody to be a little bit different than I am. So
Yeah.
what would you suggest? What are some of the ways you would suggest hiring a team that's maybe different from you?
I think that's a perfect way to think about this. Is just to use the Enneagram, or it doesn't. There's so many other tools like it, but I think that's a pretty robust tool to use as a way to enter into the difference test, the cognitive difference. But it's also ensuring that each person does have the chance to speak up. As simple as that. When you're on a call, especially in the digital world these days, sometimes people fade into the background, especially the quiet ones. So
Right.
make sure that each person is given the room to speak and their opinion is heard. That's another important part of ensuring that there's that diversity of thinking, pushing them to actually speak up and say, hey, this is what I think.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because 2 days ago we interviewed Nicole Dickman, and she said something very similar. And we're talking, she's from Envoy Managed Services, but we were talking something completely different. But she said the same thing. You've got to give them a voice. And I
Yeah.
think I love that 2 people in a row have said the same thing, because it's that important. It's really that important.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So,
definitely.
well, before we go, and I am completely throwing you under the bus here by not giving you a warning that we were going to do this. But tell me what your 3 favorite books are for growth, for helping
No.
people grow.
Oh, so don't worry about that. I'm an avid reader. Probably read too many books. So I would say my 3 favorite books for growth would be. I would choose one that is probably the most obvious, and it's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I just couldn't go without mentioning that because it's so
Yeah.
fundamental, and it's just so powerful. And the second one would be um, The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander, which this is a powerful book because, first of all, I've met the author. He's an amazing character, but it really opens up so many thoughts around, this a different lens you can take on looking at life. And if you just think about how life has so many ways of pulling you back in and saying, okay, this could be a dire situation. But if you open up your lens and say, wow, there's so many possibilities, you just got to change the way you look at it. It's a very powerful book from a guy who, concentration camps, kind of comes from the Viktor Frankl school of life. And it's just very empowering. And the
And I
third
haven't
one,
read that one, so I'm really excited.
yeah, oh, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And the third one is one that changed my life in a big way. It's called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani. And this book comes from a guy who started the Mind Valley School. And this book is really powerful because it challenges all the preconceived notions we have about society, going to school, following the rules. Well, these are all rules made up by society. Who says we have to follow them? We can follow our own rules. He has this thing called rules that we follow just blindly. And his thinking just really challenged me, and I loved that. And so for people who are on this path of thinking, okay, well, why do I do all the things I do? This will really challenge you.
I love that. Well,
Yeah.
and as a mom, how you said you have one son?
I do. 11 years
Okay.
old.
Yeah. So I have a 13-year-old, and as a mom, it's so. I think with my older two kids, because I have 26, 24, and 13, I think with the older two kids, I kind of pushed them down. These are the rules you should follow. And my last one, I'm like, what do you want to do? What do you
Yeah.
want to do with your life? And it's and he wants to be a musician. I'm like, okay, try to be a musician. I think that would be great. But I think we do put these rules on our children in particular. So, all right, I want to tell people how they can get in touch with you so they can find you at inspiredcoach.com. How
Yeah.
else might they find you?
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other social channels. But I think the best place is just to find me on my website, inspiredpurposecoach.com, and I'm happy to connect.
Awesome. And after the show, we'll put this in the show notes how you can find Tony. I'll also I'll be tagging you on everything where I post this, so they can just kind of click through there as well. It's an easy way to find you. I want to remind people what we have coming up. We're doing things a little differently now. I think our format is growing and it's changing all the time. So we were doing 5 days a week. We went to 2 days a week. We went back to 5 days a week. Now we're going to go to 3 days a week, but more of an interview format. So we've been doing some interviews, and then we've been doing some where I come on and give you a social media tip. If you want more of those, let me know. Maybe we'll start something different for that. But Friday, we have Sarah Noel Block coming in, and she's going to talk to you about small team marketing. So I'm really excited about that, because so often, you hear about Southwest Air, right? They do a phenomenal job with their social media. Wendy's does a phenomenal job with their social media. Moon Pie does a great job. But we're not that. We're small businesses. So how does your small business going to market itself out there? How are you going to do that with a small team? So I also want to remind you can subscribe to this podcast. We'd really appreciate that. We have just over 500 listens right now where people have downloaded us, and that makes me happy. And then you can find more information about digital marketing. If you're like, I just can't do it anymore, we can. That's what we love to do. So ASMMdigital.com. We'd love to hear from you. Tony, this was great. You are a nice find, because we were not previously connected. So when I found out about you, I read about you, I was so excited to have you on. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hang around just 1 minute. All right, guys, I will see you Friday. I'm looking forward to it. Take care.